Hello, I am Bernardo Merizalde, MD. I'm an assistant clinical professor at the Department of Integrative Medicine at Thomas Jefferson University in Philadelphia. I've been practicing integrative medicine for about 40 years, and I have my integrativelife.us is my website, and that is the message that I give in terms of the healing process that I offer. I have looked at different complementary and integrative approaches to health, not just looking at different organ systems, but looking at the individual as a whole. When I work with people, I look at four different main dimensions of being. One is the biological, looking at genetic makeup, the people's sensitivities and susceptibilities to disease, temperament, which is mostly innate, the desires, passions, motivations that can arise from organic needs. I mean, starting with food and drink, but also sleep and activity. Then I look at the social emotional components that come from the environment, basically. So the nature and the nurture, looking at what environment a person has grown up with, because we know that those elements of where we have come from is going to affect how the mind evolves and how our sense of self develops and how we face the world. And that is the psychological component, which is that third dimension of being. As we move along through our growth, we go through different developmental stages, which are called the ego developmental stages. And it has to do with the maturation of the nervous system from the earlier neurological structures that are there at birth, and progressively as the higher functions in the nervous system mature from birth up until around age 24, when full maturation of the brain is accomplished. And along the way, all these different, more and more integrated and complex functions evolve. And that is why the curriculum varies from kindergarten to college, because as we move along, we're able to process more and more complex information, and we're able to integrate higher and higher levels of complexity in information. Along the way, our ego develops coping mechanisms and defenses in order to maintain integrity of the self. Sometimes those defenses can get in our way to be able to open up, develop, and adapt more effectively. So part of the work that I do with people is helping them see how their own thinking patterns, their own behavioral patterns can be getting in their way for them to be the best person that they can be. Last but not least, I look at the spiritual dimension. And by spiritual, I don't necessarily mean organized religion. Organized religion is a sociological component that has gotten and arisen in different cultures around the world. Many of them are completely contradictory, but there could be some basic elements they share. And that's what the mystics in every tradition have been talking about. And for further reference on this and the contrast, and as a point of view that I support, you can read Sam Harris's book, Waking Up, where he does an incredible summary of that perspective of how to distinguish religion from spirituality. And that spiritual construct doesn't mean that we become a theist or that we actually believe that there's a separate entity called spirit that transcends. You may or may not believe in that, and may or may not be true. We may not have actually the ability to determine that from a scientific standpoint, but from an experiential standpoint, we are able to experience these kind of transcendent states of being, that we can transcend our sense of self, our body, our emotions, our thoughts, and enter into that space of oneness or feeling, experience of oneness with our surroundings. And that's what that spiritual dimension can be. We can experience it going to the shore and experiencing a beautiful sunrise as it comes up, arising from the horizon. Or we can go to a museum and watch a beautiful painting, or watching a film and having an incredibly inspired experience watching that film. Or we can do a contemplative meditation practice and experience that sense of expansiveness. So entering into that space, being able to dial down the stress response is really, really important from a biological standpoint and from a psychological standpoint. We're able to change our chemistry in our body and be able to reduce that reactivity that we have and the tension, the stress that can be the source of many different physical conditions. A lot of diseases, probably about 90%, have an emotional component to a greater or lesser extent. Conditions like such as peptic ulcer disease or hypertension, or even eruptions, allergies, asthma can be influenced by emotional factors. So being able to get together, explore those different dimensions from a biological standpoint, family history and medical history, looking at the social environmental, which includes diet, looking at the psychological, how we are perceiving the world and exploring the world and integrating those things, and the spiritual practices that a person may encounter. It could be painting as well. Those things are going to be very important for seeking that integrative life. So I welcome you to this path, and I'll be glad to provide as much information as I can for you to continue your journey towards health. Thank you.